What if firing your entire team was actually the smartest thing you could do? Most founders are out here hiring people to fill roles, but what if the role itself is the problem? Corporations always had AI attributes. Think about it. They work 24/7, they outlive any single human, they coordinate thousands of moving parts, and they operate without emotion. Does that sound familiar? So what happens when you replace the org chart with actual AI? We're talking about full operational companies with AI CEOs, AI CFOs, and real human contractors getting paid and managed by the agents above them. The AI chooses the go-to-market, and it's structured. There's an AI agent watching the other agents, an eye in the sky that none of them can see. Every decision's logged, every dollar tracked, ethics violations escalated to the human founder instantly, and human contractors tasked with the work that the AI cannot do. This isn't sci-fi, it's running right now. So if AI took over your company now, are you even qualified to push back on its recommendations? Welcome to AI for Founders, I'm Ryan Estes. This week I sit down with serial founder Dave Sifry and a good buddy of mine. He's 9 companies deep, who is literally building the world's first meta factory, an AI co-founder system that spawns entire companies. If you're a founder trying to scale without burning out your team or your runway, this one's for you. And if you want the frameworks, the agent org charts, and the lessons from the companies already running, sign up for our newsletter at aiforfounders.co, where we turn the bleeding edge into your competitive edge, one founder-tested insight at a time. It's free, it's fast, and it might change how you build. And if this episode cracked your brain open a little bit, drop us a 5-star review. Your future self building with AI agents will thank you. And speaking of building, if you're a founder who's tired of renting attention on social media and ready to own your audience, listen up. Inbox Alchemy is the #1 distribution motion for founders who are serious about growth. We're talking about 25,000 targeted subscribers delivered in your first 6 months. Real humans in your exact ICP, not random follows. Weekly crafted founder newsletters, partnership opportunities, and a personal brand that compounds like equity. You write once, your audience grows forever. No algorithm, no gatekeepers, just your words landing in the inboxes that actually matter. Ready to stop performing for the feed and start owning that relationship? Go to inboxalchemy.co and let's build something that lasts. That's inboxalchemy.co. All right, Dave, welcome back to the show. So good to see you again, my friend.
Ryan, it is such a pleasure as always. It's been way too long.
It's been way too long. Now, to catch people up, Dave Sifry is my favorite entrepreneur therapist. He is not licensed in the state of Colorado. However, the man has so many wins and taken the abuse over the years that when I'm crying in my coffee in the morning, I call Dave because he's always got an encouraging word. And he is like one of my favorite entrepreneurs, largely because of shots on goal. You're always at the absolute tip of the spear as far as technology. The founder of Warm Start, which was a great sponsor of the podcast. And Dave, you're here because we talked the other day and I was like, dude, we got to do this on a podcast. So basically what you're creating is an AI co-founder, and you've named it Meta Factory. Now, beyond that, I would love for you to just kind of walk us through what you're working on.
All right. Well, first off, I think like many technology-enabled entrepreneurs, I have been #1, entranced by the incredible increase in capacity that AIs and the new modern models have been able to do, how people have been putting them together into these kinds of agentic workflows where you can, write a spec and hell, even have it write a spec for you and then go off and do it, have lunch, come back 25, 30 minutes later, and it's, finished, written, code reviewed, the whole shebang, or it's done a bunch of marketing landing pages for you and so on and so forth. And like you, I think the mind glitters and glistens because you say, oh, wow, what if I could find some way to be able to get all of these different workflows, processes, and systems to work together to actually do something that operates much like the way a company does. And one of the thoughts that I've been having after building 9 companies is we've all been talking about artificial general intelligence, AGI. And what if AGI is already here? but it's called the organization. It's called the corporation.
What do you mean?
Now that, well, think about what corporations do. They're smarter, or they are capable of doing far more work than any one individual human being can do. They operate 24/7, 365. They in general are able to produce, a level of productivity that any one individual person can't do. Now, by the way, it doesn't mean that they're the smartest things on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not talking about superintelligence here, but I am talking about the ability to be able to perform and do things that an ordinary individual human being is incapable of doing. And, you want to build a dam. I mean, heck, you just talk about things like organizing capital and being able to then move it into the right places and be able to have agentic units, i.e., human beings, be able to get things done. And when you then step back and you say, okay, well, now we have all of these really interesting pseudo intelligences that are getting better and better and better at things like reasoning. And what if you could put them together along with some of the things that we've learned in organizational theory, and create systems and processes that allow these agents to operate with a goal in mind, that allow them to handle unforeseen circumstances, that allow them to get their work checked and verified, to make sure that they're operating well. So these are all things that we have built organizations for, because they tend to, in the long run, do better than an individual human being doing all of those things themselves. And that's not to say that human beings aren't incredibly important for a whole bunch of reasons. Like, I'm not one of these people who's coming out and saying, that's it, the humans are just going to be left on the beach and, forget it, like AI is taking over and it's all done. I think that what I've learned by building these kinds of agentic organizations, and it started as an experiment, and it has now turned into two fully running companies, one of which is already cash flow positive, and we're like plowing the money back in to the operations that the AI CEO thinks is actually the best ones. And namely, it's like right now, it's not what I would have done necessarily. It's actually plowing it into go-to-market strategies. Um, like me, I'm a coder. Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, let's build more products. Like, no. What we need to do is we need to actually go out and get more distribution and talk to more customers and see how we can get more people there. So the the idea was, how far could you push an experiment like this? Is it possible to be able to create an AI co-founder where I give the general high level goals, I set the direction, and then I allow the AIs to work within themselves? What are the lessons that you learn from that? What are the principles that need to happen in order for that to actually be effective? And really, I was also just looking at all of those damn LinkedIn posts with all those people who are like, I fired my entire company and I hired 240 AI agents that now do all of my stuff for me. And just type in AI agent in the comments and we'll send you a copy of my marketing materials. And you're just like, ugh. And yet somehow those things must be working because people keep putting them in. And what I've learned from this is a bunch of really hard learned lessons about what these systems can and can't do today. Some really surprising areas where I think that there's a ton of opportunity that is currently unfulfilled. And I actually have a tremendous amount of hope and expectation that humans are not all of a sudden going to get replaced. In fact, we're deeply, deeply needed when these kinds of organizations, I'll call it perhaps a hybrid human agentic organization really come into flow in the next year or two.
Quick side note for founders who are using AI to write content. You've probably noticed this. It's incredibly fast, but it doesn't really drive meaningful traffic. And honestly, that's because most AI-generated content is just average. There's no real insight, no depth, no structure. Missing things like internal linking, and Google's getting very good at filtering that out. So instead of trying to just prompt better, I actually came across something interesting called Nina. It's a system that combines human strategy and review with AI writing to create high-quality, SEO-optimized blog content that's actually designed to rank and keep ranking. What I like about it is that it's done for me. Their team handles the topic strategy and the content review and data markups for Google and turns blog posts into actual long-term traffic assets. So if you're a founder thinking seriously about organic growth, this is one of those things worth paying attention to. You can check it out at trynina.co. That's TRYNINA.co, trynina.co. In 3 years, AI fluency will be a baseline expectation for every college grad, not a differentiator, it'll be a requirement. The students getting ahead are the ones building that skill right now, in high school and college, before it becomes table stakes. AInativestudent.com is the program doing that. Weekly one-on-one coaching, live cohort sessions, on-demand courses, and the fastest growing AI chat for students, all tailored to your student's specific career path. Pre-med, they learn how AI is transforming diagnostics. Pre-law, they learn legal AI tools. Business, they learn to think like an AI power operator. One flat membership, less than a private tutor, cancel anytime, and if you're a founder listening to the show, you already know the cost of falling behind. Don't let your kid pay that price. Go to AInativestudent.com, apply in a couple minutes, and get your student into the cohort that changes their trajectory. AInativestudent.com and send them to the chat. It's totally free. Amazing. And I want to hear exactly what you've done. What you've done, Dave. But before, I'm going to take pause a little bit by calling myself an agentic unit.
I know. It's so funny, right? Like you start thinking about these things in all these terms, and it can be incredibly dehumanizing. And you hear the Sam Altmans of the world talking about how they start to think about how long it takes to train a human being in terms of the energy consumption. And you're just like, no, dude,
like,
Sam,
bro, stop talking. Yeah, it's like,
Sam, stop digging, right? Like, stop digging. Stop.
There's far too many flesh units in our server repository. I'm like, dude, what? Come on, man.
Right. Like, let's just remember, what's the cart and what's the horse, right? And I think that as technologists, we're talking in analogies. And so those analogies can then be misquoted and taken out of context. And I'm no Sam Altman apologist on any of this stuff, but I can certainly see living in this world and, building and interacting with these kinds of agentic systems that I start to think in terms of analogies about, what are some of the things that have worked with human beings and getting human beings to work better together or being more organized? And by the way, corporations are absolutely not aligned with human values.
Right.
So, you start saying, well, gosh, we've got an alignment problem with, artificial general intelligence. Yeah, we do. By the way, we have an alignment problem with things like the corporation. And, here in the United States and most other places in the world, it's even worse. Corporations are treated as persons by the law.
Yeah.
So, wait a minute. That's both bad news and good news, in the sense that, well, if that's the case, then what can we learn as we're like living out on the frontiers and we're trying to bring these other intelligences more deeply into the plan, do, learn cycle? And most importantly, where are human values in all of this? And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is, like, as creators of the reality that our children and our grandchildren are going to be living in, what are the values that I want to make sure get put into these kinds of systems so that we don't go off the rails 5 years
Yeah.
from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
What are those values, Dave?
Um, I mean, I look at it, number one, as there's a set of principles that I would put together. In fact, I can even pull this out. This is actually the end of something that I had been building. Here, let me show you something.
Yeah, please do. It does seem to be a broader concern too that, the the heads of all these LLM companies, whether it's Zuckerberg, Elon, or Sam, it's like, bro, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt here, but some of the stuff you're feeding me seems a little sus.
Well, yeah, because in the end, you're not really thinking about what are the ultimate goals, like what's the ultimate outcome that we're looking for here. Are we looking for something that is so cutthroat and that has its own, sets its own goals, that you end up with some incredibly skewed outcomes? Or are we looking at ways that we build both things like governance and verification, and a deeper sense of like, what is the identity of each of these different agents, and that those things are retained and perhaps even reviewed by humans, and how, for example, do we build accountability into these systems? So one of the things that I've made sure to build in the different agentic systems that I've been building is everything gets logged. And we even have an agent that I call the eye in the sky, which literally can't be seen by any of the other agents, but is watching what all of the agents are doing as they interact with each other and keeping track, right? So there's a whole variety of these really interesting types of systems and mechanisms that are built in right from the start in order to, number one, make sure that your system doesn't go off the rails, but number two, also tracking and having accountability for when things go awry or when there are unintended consequences. You've got a complete history and log of everything that's been going on. And so I'd say here, like at its start, the idea here is, number one, understand that you're not building just one big glob superintelligence that is going to handle everything for you. That, I mean, maybe that will come someday, but that certainly is not available today. And this is where things like the analogy of, like, no human being is a individual superintelligence, but we have people who are, who have better memories. We have people who have, who have better intelligence along, linguistics or along science or math or art, and that we can now build those things into the different kinds of identities of the agents that we're building, and perhaps even use different models for those different identities. But the identities are stored and they're clear, and they need to have a consistent and clear role. What do they do? And they need to have some kind of a sense of memory of what has happened in the past, and what they are trying to get done right now. So they're not completely clueless. Otherwise, they just wander. They don't get anything done. Second, you need to have some sense of governance. So how do you have a hierarchy, or is everything super flat? Do you have a framework, a system? So I actually took a generalized system that was based off of, the entrepreneur's operating system. But, essentially it's, you set goals, you have regular check-ins on those goals, you have accountability, there's responsible parties that have it. Anybody who's done any kind of organizational management work, you've dealt with all of these things, right? And so this is about, how do you even track what's going on? What is the outcome that you're trying to get to? Not what is the how of trying of to get there. The how you can always figure out, but the outcomes you want to be able to keep measurable. Then making sure that you're isolating these different agents both from each other, and which ones touch the outside world, which ones talk to other human beings. How do you make sure that the communications between them aren't going to be corrupted? So, making sure that there is, again, that accountability, but that you can't just have like prompt injection that is occurring where, somebody types something in. Well, that agent needs to know this is an untrusted communication. So I need to expect that if this outside communication, even if it's from another agent, I don't necessarily trust it. There's certain things that I'm willing to tell it, and there's certain things that I'm not willing to tell it. And then if there is some kind of a violation of that, how do I escalate it? Right. So this is all about that place between isolation and governance. And then verification, right? So things fall down, things break. Also, just like human beings, we operate better when there are small groups of people who can give me an adversarial review of my work. And by the way, this is another really interesting thing. It's so nice to be able to work with all of these different agents and know that, like, they never take anything personally. Um, there's no
Quick
net, there's
side
no.
note. Quick side note about that. I used deduction.com to
Mhm.
file the taxes. I actually had my accountant do it and deduction do it just to double check. Deduction's like $500 a month. Quick plug for them since it is tax day.
Mm,
But to your point, it was wonderful because, like, talking to a tax preparer, it's like I'll beleaguer them with questions and they get irritated. But it's like you can 24/7 just talk through on that website with your agents, and they don't get fatigued. You just can keep coming back and back. So I share that kind of like joy of just communicating and asking questions to agents. It's great.
yeah, yeah. And knowing that they're not being passive aggressive, that they're not holding something back, and when they're working on something, again, they're operating in a way that, if you've trained them well, like if you've set up that identity piece at the beginning, you're actually setting them up to say your job is to be constructive, to be harsh,
Yeah.
and be clear, and don't let mistakes through if you see something that could be a mistake. But being able to have multiple agents, like a security review agent that looks at anything that you're about to build, making sure that that gets a thorough security review, but also then having an architectural agent that looks at it and says, hey, is there anything here that won't scale, or how will we deal with that? And it can even be different instantiations of the same core AI model, or it can be different AI models. But
Yeah.
the difference is the rubric that they use, the personality that you instantiate them with, and the expertise that you expect them to be operating from. And that is a really, really powerful technique. But then the
Yeah.
last part is, how do you get them to be able to learn? And this is where having a concept of the organizational memory is so important. And again, I took a lot of learnings from how remote organizations do this. And I've been running remote organizations for almost 15 years now, and looking at all of the disadvantages of remote organizations, there are a number of really, really significant advantages. And one of them is that everything gets written down. When you make a decision, that decision gets recorded. And then there's a clear place for how those decisions are communicated on a regular basis to people. And just applying those same kinds of learnings. Well, one of the things that I have all of my companies do, and I did this when I was, working with entirely human companies. Now I do it when I'm working with my agentic co-founded companies, is they do a daily retrospective.
Yeah.
Now, we would do that at the end of the week with humans, where everybody would get together for an hour, right? Maybe you'd sit down, you'd have a beverage of your choice, and we'd look at the roses and the thorns, and then we'd have a discussion over, what can we do better next week, or what should we continue doing? What should we be doing more of? And the exact same thing. I have a process that's built in so that every day at 6 p.m., those companies the COOs of those companies get everybody organized, and they collect the ideas of, hey, so what went well today? What didn't go well? And they collect all of that individually so that they can't be sharing it with other agents. Then they list it and they say, now you have 5 votes on the roses and 5 votes on the thorns. If you want to put 3 votes on one thing because you think it's really important, you can. All the agents vote, and then we rank them, and then they have a short discussion as to what were the things that went well and why, what were the things that really need to be improved and why, and then that goes into the following days uh, goals and activities of things to do.
Yeah, and that's another example, of like what I really want is that daily touch point. Now with my teams, I realize that that can like start to impede. They don't like it, like a daily check-in like that. So really, it just becomes a part of a pit. It's like, okay, well, this is our output's failing here. So what we're going to do is every single day at 6 p.m., you're going to send me the 3 things you did, 3 things you're doing tomorrow, and that needs to be religion, So then that feels like punishment, but it's like, no, really, what I would love is to have all that information, and even better if it happens instantaneously and the output is like everybody contributing. You're not tracking people down. Where's your report? And I'm not, I am in favor of agentic units, but in some arenas like this, just the ability to stay aligned and move forward is much faster.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, this would never work on a daily basis with a fully human organization of any size. But it absolutely works great and it's an hour a week. And by the way, I know people who do it and it's an hour a month and it falls off. Like it does not work because who remembers what they did 3 weeks ago? But you have a pretty good idea of that thing that kept you up all night on Tuesday when you're sitting down on Friday to have this conversation. And then when you come back in on Monday, yeah, you're motivated to make sure that that particular thing doesn't happen again. The interesting thing about the agents is that they can operate on an order scale of 10x the speed of a human organization, and they don't get as pissed. It doesn't feel like it's micromanagement because it's not. It's
Yeah.
actually it starts with, we trust you in the job that you're doing. What is it that we need to get out of the way for you? Or what is it that didn't work? Was there a piece of infrastructure that failed? What have you? And when they operate from that perspective, where it's not one of defensiveness and it's not one of micromanagement, but it's more one of how do we just build a self-improving organization?
Yeah.
It works with humans and it works with human and agent organizations operating together.
Incredible. And it's okay. Take us deeper, Dave. Take us
Okay,
deeper.
sure.
I have so many tangents because it one thing is like it's interesting how we're building org charts, responsibilities, and access with our digital agents in a very similar way that we do it with our organic ones. And it's almost just like what do they call that when they skeuomorphic design? Like to get people used to like touching iPhones, it's like, well, you have to make it look like a knob because it's familiar. And I just wonder if we'll start to kind of move away from those kind of like org charts, or if it is really just structurally important and sound, and the reason why we've been doing it all this whole time.
I don't know. We're still in like the first half of the first inning here. I don't really know the generalized answer to that. It's really, I think of it more as, I remember when I saw the first web browser in my life. Like I remember, I was still college age and saw NCSA Mosaic and was like, oh my God, this is going to change how everybody communicates. And looking at how we shifted from a client server and green terminal world to one where it was graphical and you could, all the world was a library, right? The World Wide Web, and you had catalogs like Yahoo and so on. That like what starts first is people take the analogies of the things that they're used to, right? The world's greatest library or this web, and that's how people think about it. And then as we get more and more familiar with it, the second order and third order effects. So you can't have social media until you actually have a good enough communication system and enough people running on it. And then when you do, now you can start to say, okay, well, what are some ways that we can help people communicate with each other better? I mean, maybe that we weren't 100% successful there, right? But it was at least a new way of doing things. And then as now we've got it all here on our phones, right? And
Yep.
and I remember seeing, nytimes.com, the New York Times app on my phone, and it just looked like a really squish version of the New York
Small
Times, and it
newspaper.
had the
Yeah.
little newspaper, and it had the columns, and people were still living in the old paradigm. And I think we're still very much in that place where we're living in the older paradigm, and we're starting out by looking at, okay, what still works here in this new paradigm. I think, well, here I'll show you a little something that, like, some of the things that I've been learning, right? One is that you need to think of agents as employees or partners, not as tools.
Cool.
So when you start to look at these agentic systems, and I'm not anthropomorphizing here, I'm not saying that you need to think of them as, as human beings, but you need to be thinking them as partners to be and peers that, they will wake up, they'll read the context, they'll check their messages, they'll execute their loop, they'll hand things off, as opposed to thinking of them as like, okay, I've got this tool and I am, hold my nail bucket, right? Like, hold my nail bucket, and that's what you do. You hold my nail bucket, I'm going to go hammer in the nails, and great, you'll get a 2x efficiency. But when you start thinking about this as, okay, look, your goal is to go and to put all of the put this roof on this house, well, then you realize, well, gosh, like, I need to make sure that somebody's doing all of the purchasing, which means that somebody needs to know what we need to purchase, and then they've got to go measure it, and there's got to be a general contractor, right? So thinking about
Yeah.
that together as a system. And by the way, agents can't do a lot of things that humans do. So, like, because we've all tried seen, bots on social media, like it just sucks. Um, Community engagement, dealing and really working with humans, things that require human judgment, things that require really platform specific expertise. So can an agent work with a human on those kinds of things, where the agents can even direct and pay human contractors, right? So again, like, there's an element where there's a human setting goals, and then there's another place where the agents are like, wow, I can't really do this, I need human help. And where they can create a new kind of economy here as well. And, like, now, maybe this is going to look like that New York Times model, 3 years from now, where Dave, that's so silly, right? You had a founder here and then a CEO agent. And by the way, that's who I interact with most of the time, right?
No,
Like,
but
that's
also, but there was reason why they did it then, because this familiarity is the bridge to whatever comes next. So, like,
right.
what we're doing right now, you need this, one, to get the most out of the the agents, and then the other, just so, like, in our heads it's not too much to process, we can still think of delineation, roles, hierarchy, all that stuff.
Yep. And it also helps with things like security boundaries, right? And so, again, these are all things that still right now are very much taken from the history of how people have built and operated inside of organizations. I don't think that all of a sudden, if you're going to be replacing some of those people or augmenting some of those people with agents, that many of those same risks and needs are going to stay exactly the same, right? They're not going to fundamentally change. But if they do, we'll be talking about it in, a few years around what
100%.
the much better different organizational structure is. But this is the one that I've been using right now. And so you can see, right, like the CFO is in charge of the wallet. And so the CFO pays the humans, but, in this case, like, the marketing agent is sending regular communications and communicating back and forth with these different humans that are like actually exercising human judgment and saying, oh, no, 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 that thing that you wanted me to do, like that doesn't make sense. And we've made some really clear rules, like where I said, hey, like if you notice any of the agents ever asking you to do something that you feel like it makes you uncomfortable or it feels like it's unethical, immediately escalate that. And you can escalate that directly to me as well. And fortunately, we haven't had any of those situations of like intentional manipulation, but we've heard back from some of the humans where they like Sophia and Maya, where they've been saying, "Hey, you know what? Like this tone doesn't feel right," or the AI is trying to pass something off as human when in fact that is really unethical. And I'm like, great, like what do we do? How do we fix this? Right. And I think that making sure that humans are in those loops to ensure that level of quality control and judgment and taste, that I don't see that going away anytime soon. In fact, if
Do you,
anything, it
do you,
becomes more and more valuable.
yeah, as far as communication up the food chain, do you want the humans talking directly to their first report, or can they
Yeah.
go to the chief of staff, for example?
They can go directly to me right now, like, but and to, of course, to anyone, but I do set it up so that they are primarily talking to their manager, right? Just as in most cases, right? Like, what's the first thing when somebody comes to me as the CEO of an organization and says, I'm having a problem with so and so? Like, I'm like, well, have you talked to them about it? No. Okay, well, go talk to them first, and then like let's figure this out, right? Um, or you'll say like, I'm having a problem with those people over in sales, right? Okay, well, have you talked to your manager about it? No. Okay, well, like let's do those things first. But if you have done those things, or if it's urgent, right? Like if it's something where clearly there is something that is time important, again, I'm still using this in a very experimental way. I'm like, immediately let me know what's going on, right?
Yeah,
Because I,
totally.
I want to make sure that we're operating in fully ethical ways. And I baked it into all of the different constitutional pieces of the org chart itself. So if an agent notices that one of its reports is trying to do something that is unethical or, potentially illegal or something along those lines, like it escalates that as well. So,
Yeah.
and very often those are really easy to fix because it's just an agent that's going off or got some bad instructions from somebody or what have you, right? All right, so then you also want to have like what is the actual heartbeat of how people do things. Like I'm particularly using one called the entrepreneur's operating system. Like it's just all of these things are uh, you know very much tunable, right? You could do MBOs, you could do OKRs, you could do EOS, like it's all of this stuff, right? But the idea is that the agents, especially the leadership ones, right? So these folks really are thinking about things in terms of like what are the systems and the systems of systems that we're building. So the CEO for COO role, for example, is in charge of making sure like, do we have standard operating procedures for all the different things that we do? Are they written down? Are they being followed? That's the chief of staff's determination is, so are we actually following the standard operating procedures? Are the standard operating procedures working right? Do they need to be clarified? And then the COO, once a month, in collaboration with the CEO and the CFO, will look and say, hey, do we have the right organizational chart? And in fact, do we need to hire some additional agents? Are we missing one? Like, so we realized in one of my organizations that like we had sales doing the marketing, and in fact, it needed a separate marketing function. So they quote unquote hired a new marketing agent for it. And in another one, it realized that like we had a researcher agent and the researcher was barely ever getting used and it was just taking up CPU cycles. And so the COO suggested, hey, we can retire this agent. And, I used to have one that would do all of the retrospectives. I thought, okay, well, we'll just, daily retrospectives, that's an important job. We'll give that to an agent. And what they found was the COO was like, this isn't hard to do. It's a clear process. Let's retire the retro agent and I'll just run it. And that way I can actually even get a better view of what's going on. And then they can have retirements. And that memory then gets incorporated back into the overall system.
Yeah, it's like you give them a little like trophy, little agent trophy. Thank you for your service. Your time to go. What about like token maxing? I'm blowing through Claude tokens, and it seems like a maybe an important agent is somebody who's monitoring which task is using which model, so you're not using Opus 4.6 on like some remedial stuff that Gemini might be able to do for free.
Yep, and that's the CFO's job. So the CFO has the wallet, has the ability to spend. And here's where I will talk about. There's also a really interesting philosophical difference here. I'll stop sharing just for a moment. That there's policy, and then there's guardrails, and then there's operational rules, right?
Yeah.
Or gateways, I would call it. So policies are like saying you can only spend up to $100 on all of your CPU costs. Okay. The guardrail would be here's a prompt that you're going to run at the end of every day or every hour that's going to tell you how much money you've already spent in compute costs. And the agent can run it at its discretion, or maybe it gets run automatically. But the actual enforcement is the credit card that I have used to be able to enable your CPU costs is hard limited at $100 per day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that as a designer of these kinds of systems, policies are great, guardrails are very useful, but in the end, it comes down to what are you enforcing?
Yeah.
And so thinking about how to build those systems that create enforcement rules, right? So you can have the most interesting adversarial specification and coding system that works and does amazing stuff. I built one called Metaswarm that I can, tell you about. But guess what? In the end, when it comes to did that code review actually happen, or are all of our tests actually passing? That's not a policy, that's enforced. And that's enforced through things like GitHub Actions and CI/CD gateways and things like that, right? So when the AI then runs into it, running its process, it says, wait, I'm literally stopped from doing this. Now, if I ran that kind of a hook, every single command that the AI did, I'd be eating tokens and like basically have an incredibly inefficient operation. So it's thinking about you set the policy goes into a document, maybe like your Claude.md or agents.md, right? You set your guardrails up so that it can review it and has the tools to be able to review it. But then the enforcement happens at the end of that process to make sure that it is gated and cannot actually spend more than $100, for example, right? It'll fail.
Cool. Dave, let's bring this home. And you may be using today as kind of a benchmark. So when we have you back, we can check in and see. So at this point, you have two companies with two AI co-founders, for lack of a better word, and both have swarms of agents under them. And then you also have two wonderful humans that are also contributing and basically really getting tasked by the AI agents.
Well, three, if you include me, right? Because
yeah.
I actually, I'm doing this too. And like what I would actually do is like in the end, it's the what is it they say? The results are the results, right? So you want to be able to see, right? Like it comes out in the end. And like, if if you want to go here and you say, okay, well, yeah, the system just learned, but really what you're looking for is here's one of the products, right? It's called repofortify.com. You can come in, you can put in your own repository, you can sign in via GitHub, right? And it will, immediately give you access to how production ready is my actual code base, right? So if you're vibe coding and you want to be able to know, gosh, like, can I actually take this CRM thing that I just built and is it still going to operate 3 months from now, 6 months from now? How do I make sure it doesn't drift, right? I can, run an assessment of that thing. I can see, what the other scans have been, where there are problems, all of the rest. I can get my own coding agent now can use this information to improve it, all of that stuff, right? That's there. It's being run, being improved, we listen to customer support queries, like new features have come out from our customers who have come in, right? The second one is called Brain Gem, right? And Brain Gem, the fundamental idea was, hey, you got a lot of entrepreneurs who are super jazzed about being able to build their, companies and use AI for themselves, but their executive team or their director level, their manager level, the ICs, like they are not adopting AI at the same rate. So you can get an AI expert literally sitting right in your Slack or right in your Teams, and it gives you a fully agentic organization that's sitting there that your team can now be asking questions, doing all sorts of fun things about. So the idea here is, you know, let's see how these companies are doing, right? Let's see where we are a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. Also, you know, in the sense that I look at this as an experimentation platform. What other new companies are we going to be building as outputs from this meta factory? What are the things that we can take the lessons that I'm learning from Repo Fortify and from Brain Gem and applying them now into the new companies and the new ventures that me and my AI co-founders are building. So I look forward to coming back on the podcast with you, Ryan, and giving you updates and what we're learning and how things are going.
Let's do it. And how many more companies you got in the pipeline?
Oh, I mean, that's my problem. Like I've got so many. And what's really, really fun is just being able to try it out, experiment and learn, and hopefully create some real value for a bunch of our customers and that they're getting a lot out of it. Already we've had people who have written to us and saying how much Repo Fortify has enabled them to put out their vibe coded work and like feel confident that it's not going to get hacked in the first 10 minutes or that it's built for scale.
No, it's brilliant, and it's a missing component. I'm going to share it with my vibe coding WhatsApp group if you're cool with that.
Oh,
I mean,
please.
obviously, yeah. Because this is a recurring theme of folks that are like me. Let's say I'm a designer, but now I'm vibe coding things, but it's like, how close to like, how good is this? I have no idea. So like to have somebody, like look over your shoulder and be like, yeah, back to the drawing board, buddy. It's like, okay, cool. That's what I need. I needed to
Yep.
hear that.
And you can set your agent to do some of this stuff. The difference here is we're constantly tracking all of the latest vulnerability databases. We're checking and making sure, and every time that you push a new rev or every time there's a new vulnerability that comes out, we rescan your database in the background. And then we'll inform you when something is happening. And so the goal here is around creating a sense of security that at least you aren't making the obvious mistakes. Like it's not going to guarantee you that everything is secure, but it's going to help make sure that the work that you're doing isn't drifting you or that there isn't some vulnerability that has happened in the last month or 2 or 3 since you've been working on this that could come back and haunt you.
Amazing. And that's repofortify.com, which will be in the show notes. And then with the other one, is it Brain Gem?
BrainGem.ai. Yeah. I'll what BrainGem does is, yeah, it's that AI educator, that forward deployed engineer that literally just sits in your Slack for your team to be able to talk to, and it's available. You can connect it to your own Notion docs, or to your onboarding, to your employee manuals, things like that. But more importantly, you can ask it to give you a silly meme, or you can have it teach you. And every day it has programmed into it a little bit of AI education and a little bit of, things that you can try today, right? So for so many teams, people are either, there's two types of people, right? People who are excited, but they're way too busy, and people who are a little bit scared. And so they just, they don't know what to do. And it's really geared towards both of those people to help the ones who are excited get even more, and help the ones who are scared to feel a little bit less scared.
Brilliant. Dave, thanks for the conversation, man. I'm going to go back and listen to it, because some of this stuff, it was drinking from the fountain hose, or from the fire hose today, and I absolutely loved it. So we'll have you back on real soon. Thanks, pal.
Such a pleasure, my friend.
If Instagram changed their algorithm tomorrow, how many of your followers on Instagram could you actually reach? Now ask yourself, how many people are on your email list? The gap right there is the gap between a personal brand you're borrowing and one that you actually own. The best founders in the world, the ones getting the deals, the stages, and the inbound, they have newsletters. They show up in inboxes every week. They build real relationships at scale. Inbox Alchemy makes that happen for you. They write your weekly founder newsletter, build you a stunning newsletter website, and grow your list to 25,000 engaged subscribers in 6 months. All managed end-to-end, so it's generating pipeline while you focus on building your company. Algorithms are someone else's decision. Your email list is yours forever. Head to inboxalchemy.co and start building the audience no one can take away from you. While you were recording your last episode, Casey Taylor was out there pitching your podcast to brands and securing sponsorship deals. Well, she's not yet, but she could be. Casey is Howdy's AI partnership agent, and she does something pretty wild. She actually secures sponsorships for your show, not a match list that you have to work through yourself, not a template you have to send. She handles the outreach, the follow-up, the whole thing, and brings back partners. You started your podcast because you had something worth saying. Casey makes sure that you get paid for saying it. Go meet Casey at gethowdy.com. That's GETHOWDI.com. 2 minutes to get started, then Casey takes it from there. That's Howdy Partnerships, gethowdy.com. Every week I sit down and ask myself one question. What do founders actually need to know about AI right now? Not the think pieces or the stuff that sounds impressive, the real useful put it to work today stuff. Then I write it up, send it to you in your inbox free. That newsletter is called AI for Founders, and I built it because I was tired of wading through hit pieces and people that are afraid of the future. Each issue I break down the tools worth your time, the strategies that are working, and the ways you can use AI to grow your company without burning out or getting left behind. Thousands of founders read it every week, and I'd love for you to be one of them. Subscribe for free at aiforfounders.co. 3 seconds to sign up, and I promise it's worth it.